You know what's funny? Some of us have spent thousands of coins trying to pack the newest epic cards. We've changed managers every other week, and even blamed scripting after every loss, but we've completely ignored one setting that could actually be making us play worse. The camera angle. And what's even funnier is exactly 1 year ago today, I made a video talking about camera angles and which one I thought was the best in eFootball. Fast forward to now, the game has changed. The gameplay feels different. Passing isn't exactly the same anymore, defending has changed. And I thought, why not go back and test every single camera angle again? I genuinely wanted to know if my opinion would change after all these updates, and surprisingly, it actually did. Now, before anybody says, Kachi, why are you playing AI? Trust me, I know. My internet has been absolutely shocking recently. At this point, my Wi-Fi has more interceptions than my defenders. So I decided to test everything against Legend AI because if a camera angle has a weakness, those guys will expose it immediately. They don't care about your feelings, they don't care that you're recording a video, and they definitely don't care if you just packed an epic. They'll still humble you. Now, there are 7 camera angles in eFootball, but let's be honest with ourselves, not all 7 deserve the same amount of attention. Some of them are decent, some of them are very situational, and then there are 3 that I genuinely think stand above the rest, depending on how you actually play football. If you're a possession game player, your best camera isn't going to be the same as someone who plays quick counter. And if you're one of those out-wide merchants that just keeps crossing the ball until Haaland's forehead starts asking for overtime pay, then you've also got a camera that suits you better than the rest. So let's start with the obvious ones before we get into the cameras that actually made me change my mind. Mid-range is... okay, that's honestly the best way I can describe it. It's not bad, it's not amazing, it just exists. Everything feels close to you, your players are nice and big, so dribbling feels comfortable, and if you're still learning the game, this camera isn't going to punish you too much. But once the tempo of the match starts increasing, that's where I started noticing its weaknesses. Your striker starts making a run, and he's disappeared off your screen. Your fullback overlaps, and you don't even realize until he's asking why you ignored him. The amount of times I looked up and thought, where did my winger go? Was actually embarrassing. It's almost like the camera is saying, don't worry about the rest of the pitch, just focus on the guy with the ball. The problem is, football doesn't work like that. You need information before you receive the ball, not after. Dynamic wide is still a fantastic camera, and I completely understand why so many people use it. If someone asked me to recommend one camera without knowing anything about their playstyle, I'd probably still say dynamic wide, because it's the safest option. It gives you enough width, it zooms in at the right moments, zooms out when it needs to, and it doesn't really have any major weaknesses. It's like that student that scores 75 in every subject. Never the highest, never the lowest, just consistently good. But after spending a few days switching between every single camera angle, I realized something. The camera I thought I'd keep using wasn't actually the one that suited my football anymore. Now let's talk about long camera, because if you're a quick counter player, this is where things get really interesting. Quick counter is all about one thing: speed. The moment you win the ball, you're not trying to admire your midfield. You're not trying to complete 20 passes like prime Barcelona. You're trying to send your striker through before your opponent even realizes they've lost possession. That's why long camera immediately stood out to me. It gives you that extra bit of vision without making your players look ridiculously small. You can actually see runs developing before they happen, instead of guessing where everybody is. There were so many moments where I won the ball in midfield, and before I even took my second touch, I could already see my winger flying into space. On mid-range, I probably wouldn't even know he was making that run until the chance had already gone. One thing I also noticed is that through balls become much more intentional. You know those moments where you press triangle and immediately start praying somebody is running onto it? We've all been there. You release the pass, close your eyes for 2 seconds, and hope the football gods are smiling at you. With long camera, there's a lot less praying involved because you can actually see the movement. You know exactly when your striker starts bending his run, you know when your winger has beaten the fullback, and you know when to release the ball. It makes quick counter feel much more natural because you're reacting to what you can actually see instead of what you hope is happening outside your screen. The defensive side surprised me as well. People always talk about attacking when discussing camera angles, but defending is just as important. With long camera, I found myself reading danger much earlier. Instead of suddenly realizing my opponent had switched play, I could already see it developing. Instead of scrambling to close down a winger after the pass had already been played, I was already moving my fullback into position. It's one of those things you don't notice immediately, but after a few matches you realize you're conceding fewer silly goals simply because you're seeing more of the pitch. The only downside is that if you're someone who absolutely loves close control dribbling, it takes a little getting used to. Your players are slightly smaller than on mid-range, so if you're the kind of player that tries to do a double touch every 5 seconds because one TikTok told you it's unstoppable, it might feel a bit different. Not bad, just different. But honestly, if quick counter is your play style, I genuinely think this is one of the best cameras you can use because it complements the way that system is meant to be played instead of fighting against it. Now let's get to the camera that completely changed my opinion. Wide. I'm not even exaggerating when I say this. I genuinely thought I was going to finish my testing, switch back to dynamic wide, and move on with life. That's what I'd been using for months, and I had no complaints. But after spending a couple of days playing with wide, I kept asking myself one question. Why did I ever stop using this? See, I'm a possession game player. I don't mind keeping the ball. I'm not in a rush to score within 3 passes. If the opening isn't there, I'll recycle possession and start again. Some people call it boring. I call it making my opponent chase shadows until he starts dragging his defenders everywhere. That's exactly where wide camera shines. The first thing I noticed was how easy it became to see triangles. You know when people always say, football is all about creating triangles? Yeah, this camera actually makes you understand what they mean. Everywhere you look, there's another passing option. Left, right, back, forward. You're never really stuck unless you put yourself in a bad position. I know somebody watching this is already saying, but wide doesn't even show the whole pitch. Exactly, that's the point. Because if I'm playing possession game, why am I worrying about my right winger standing somewhere near the touchline while I'm trying to work my way through midfield? I don't need to see everybody. I just need to see the players that are actually involved in the move I'm building. Think about it. When Manchester City are playing out from the back, Rodri isn't looking for Haaland every 2 seconds. Sometimes it's Rodri to Stones, Stones back to Rodri, Rodri to Bernardo, Bernardo back to Rodri. Before you know it, they've completed 15 passes, and suddenly there's a huge gap because the opponent has been dragged all over the place. That's exactly how wide camera feels. You always know where your next pass is. Another thing I noticed is that it made me force fewer passes, and this is something I wasn't expecting at all. Normally when I lose possession, it's because I try to force that killer through ball when it isn't actually on. We've all done it. You convince yourself, nah, my striker will get there. Next thing you know, the defender collects the ball, thanks you for your donation, and starts a counterattack. With wide camera, I found myself being much more patient because I could clearly see another passing option. Instead of forcing the difficult ball, I just play the simple one, move into another space and keep the attack alive. It's almost like the camera is constantly whispering, relax, you don't have to force it. And honestly, that's how possession football should be played. Another thing that really surprised me was defending. People always think camera angles only affect attacking. When you lose possession while using wide, your midfield is still right there on your screen. You immediately know who to press with and who to use to block passing lanes. Instead of panicking and dragging your center back into midfield like someone who's just discovered the sprint button, you can stay calm because you actually know where everybody is. Now, does wide have weaknesses? Of course it does. No camera is perfect. If you're constantly trying to launch 50-yard through balls, you'll probably wish you could see a little more of the pitch. If your entire game plan is win the ball and immediately send Mbappe running, long camera probably suits you more. But for possession, I genuinely don't think anything comes close. I even switched back to dynamic wide halfway through my testing because I thought maybe I was imagining things. 2 matches later, I switched back to wide. I wasn't rushing attacks anymore, I wasn't forcing passes, and strangely enough, my opponents actually became easier to break down because they spent so much time chasing the ball. There's a reason people always say the ball moves faster than any player on the pitch. Wide camera makes that saying feel true. Now let's talk about the 2 camera angles that look like they were made by a Hollywood director. Live broadcast in stadium. I'll be honest, if Konami ever asked me to shoot the trailer for eFootball, I'm not using wide, I'm not using long, and I'm definitely not using mid-range. I'm picking either live broadcast or stadium without even thinking twice, because these 2 cameras are absolutely beautiful. The stadium looks alive, the crowd actually feels like they're part of the match, the lighting looks better, and every goal feels like it deserves a replay. Sometimes I'd score, and instead of skipping the celebration, I'd just sit there thinking, yeah, that looked cold. Now let's talk about live broadcast in stadium, because these 2 are almost the same. I'm not even going to lie, they're easily the best looking cameras in the game. If Konami asked me to record a trailer for eFootball, I'd probably use one of these because everything just looks so realistic. The stadium feels alive, the atmosphere is amazing, and if you're an out-wide player, these cameras actually suit your playstyle really well. Since out wide is all about stretching the pitch, switching play, and delivering crosses, these cameras make it much easier to appreciate all that space. The only problem is, after a few matches I started feeling like I was on a roller coaster. Every time the ball goes from one wing to the other, the camera is moving left, right, zooming in, zooming out. Brother, I'm trying to defend, not audition for a Fast and Furious movie. It also made me mistime a few shots and tackles because the perspective feels a little weird. They're beautiful cameras and they definitely work for out wide, but for me they're just not practical enough to use every day. If you don't mind feeling slightly dizzy after a couple of matches, then by all means, give them a try. So yeah, after going back and testing every single camera angle again, my opinion has definitely changed from what I said a year ago. At the end of the day, there's no perfect camera angle. It all comes down to how you want to play. So don't just copy your favorite YouTubers' settings because they use them. Try a few of these out, see what feels natural, and stick with the one that actually improves your game. Now I want to hear from you. What camera angle have you been using, and after watching this video, are you thinking of switching? Let me know in the comments because I'm genuinely curious to see what most of you play with. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, make sure you leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss any future eFootball content. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.